Gain-of-function research.
Gain-of-function research.
With the gain-of-function research.
Gain-of-function, which could have caused this virus.
They have a lot of coronavirus work in there, both natural, and then we know they're doing gain-of-function.
These experiments, called gain-of-function, aim to make viruses more infectious and more virulent to try and predict which may cause a pandemic.
In today's video, we're going to cover 3 things around the origins of the COVID-19 pandemic. The first one, what is gain-of-function? Secondly, why is gain-of-function all over the news these days? And thirdly, why the recent investigation led by the World Health Organization may be invalid. The first time I heard Senator Rand Paul accuse Dr. Fauci and his team of gain-of-function, I thought it had to do with the breach in some sort of conflict of interest policy. Well, it turns out that it's way more severe than that. But if we're just meeting, my name is Michael, and our mission here in Cyberstruck is to keep you updated with the latest artificial intelligence, genomics, blockchain technology, and science news. So, off we go. Unless you live under a rock, you may have heard in the mainstream news that for the last couple of days, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the director of the US National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, NIAID, and the face of the nation's COVID-19 response, is being questioned for something called gain-of-function. And while we won't express any personal opinion on these accusations, the goal of today's video is to help you understand what gain-of-function is and why it matters. Let's begin with what gain-of-function research is.
Gain-of-function research, as you know, is juicing up naturally occurring animal viruses to infect humans.
Or in a more formal way, gain-of-function is a study and investigation that improves the ability of a pathogen to cause disease in order to help define the fundamental nature of human-pathogen interactions and thereby enabling assessment of the pandemic potential of emerging infectious agents. In other words, gain-of-function can increase the transmissibility or how easy the virus spreads, the virulence, which is often quantified based on mortality, illness, or lesions, the immunogenicity, which is the ability of the virus to provoke an immune response in our body, and the host tropism, or the range of host cells the virus can infect. This is achieved through genetic engineering or serial passaging, which involves allowing the pathogen to grow under different conditions and then observing the changes. For instance, the pathogen may be first grown in one environment, and then a portion of it may be taken and allowed to grow in different sets of controlled environments. The process is continuously repeated, and the final product is compared to the original pathogen to understand how the microbe changed its genetic code. So now that you know what gain-of-function research is, you will understand how serious the allegations we mentioned at the beginning of this video are. Dr. Fauci and his organization are being questioned for potentially funding the COVID-19 gain-of-function research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China through a collaboration between US virologist Dr. Ralph Baric and Chinese virologist Xi Zhengli at the Wuhan Institute of Virology to insert a new bat spike protein into the backbone of the SARS virus that would enable the virus to infect human airways, which will be a completely different story than the hypothesis of this virus naturally leaping from bat to human beings. Now, is this whole gain-of-function research a new thing? No, not really. And let me give you a very brief timeline of events. Back in 2012, a group of Japanese scientists in the US published a paper showing how the H5N1 avian flu could have been transmitted to humans. The group altered the virus in a way that allowed it to thrive in mammal lungs, which are colder than avian lungs. This change made it possible for the virus to be transmitted via coughing and sneezing in ferrets. And although the paper helped explain how H5N1 avian flu became airborne in humans, it caused an outcry in the US. So within the next 2 years, in 2014, the Obama administration halted all gain-of-function research, emphasizing on the ones that could cause a pandemic. These were the influenza, MERS, and SARS viruses. However, this interruption of gain-of-function research was lifted under the Trump administration in 2017, proposing a new policy framework to assess proposed research that would create pathogens with pandemic potential. And here's the thing. In May of this year, Nicholas Wade, a senior journalist who served as staff writer for Nature, Science, and the New York Times, suggested that the COVID-19 virus could have evolved as a result of serial passaging during an ongoing gain-of-function research and thereafter leaked out of the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China. Wade's report alleges that this research in Wuhan was funded by no other than the US National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. To be more precise, that it funded the collaboration between NIAID, Dr. Ralph Baric, and Shizheng Li to enable the SARS virus to infect human airway cells by merging a new spike protein on it, which would strictly constitute gain-of-function research between the Wuhan Institute of Virology and Dr. Baric, causing scientists to inquire about the origins of the virus, natural or laboratory spillover. As you may already know, the World Health Organization has recently concluded an investigation in Wuhan to shed some light on the potential origins of the outbreak. However, what you may not know is that this investigation may have been tainted from the beginning due to a conflict of interest. Why? Because among the WHO scientists sent to Wuhan to investigate how this pandemic may have started is prominent British zoologist and president of the EcoHealth Alliance, Peter Daszak, and the only individual to be part of both the WHO and the Lancet teams investigating the origins of the virus. Mr. Daszak maintained a very strong position since early days that the origins of the virus had no place for human intervention, without ever providing evidence for his claims and collaborating in a paper as early as February 2020, condemning, and I quote, conspiracy theories suggesting that the COVID-19 does not have a natural origin, and I unquote. In an email, Mr. Daszak wrote that the paper should not be identifiable as coming from any organization or person. According to Richard Ebright, who is the Board of Governors Professor of Chemistry and Chemical Biology at Rutgers University and Laboratory Director at the Waxman Institute of Microbiology, Peter Daszak is the contractor who funded the Wuhan Institute of Virology research on bat SARS-related coronaviruses, with subcontracts of $200 million in USAID, the US Agency for International Development, and $7 million in NIH funding, representing a clear conflict of interest, and therefore the investigation conducted by the WHO should be deemed invalid. In an open letter signed by 26 scientists across the globe, Ebright and colleagues highlighted that the WHO investigation failed to meet the requirements of a credible examination, which are 1. The terms of reference should have acknowledged the possibility of a laboratory origin. 2. The investigation should have granted access of investigators to records, samples, and personnel at Wuhan Institute of Virology. 3. The investigation should have enabled collection of evidence and not mere meet and greet photos. 4. The investigation should have been authorized for months and not 12 days. And 5. The investigation should have had conflict of interest-free investigators and not individuals who were subjects of the research or closely associated with the subject of investigation. During an interview for Independent Science News, Mr. Ebright also provided 3 lines of evidence that are worth noting. First, the genome sequencing of the COVID-19 indicates that its source was either the horseshoe bat coronavirus, RATG13, or a closely related bat coronavirus. However, the outbreak occurred in Wuhan, which is tens of kilometers from the nearest horseshoe bat colony, outside of the flight range of said bat. In addition, the outbreak happened at a time of the year when horseshoe bats are in hibernation and do not leave colonies. Second, the outbreak occurred on the doorstep of a laboratory that conducts the world's largest research project on horseshoe bat viruses, that has the world's largest collection of horseshoe bat viruses, and that possessed and worked with the world's closest sequence relative of the outbreak virus. The laboratory actively searched for new horseshoe bat viruses in horseshoe bat colonies in caves in remote rural areas in Yunnan province, brought those new horseshoe bat viruses to Wuhan, and then mass-produced, genetically manipulated, and studied those new horseshoe bat viruses year-round inside Wuhan. And third, the protective equipment used at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, usually just gloves, and insufficient biosafety standards would pose a very high risk of infection or field collection upon contact with the virus. And back to Peter Daszak, in December 2020, he tweeted, and I quote, "No bats were sent to Wuhan laboratory for genetic analysis of viruses collected in this field. That is not how science works. We collect bat samples, send them to the lab. We release bats where we catch them." End quote. In another tweet, Mr. Daszak stated, and I quote again, "This is a widely circulated conspiracy theory. This piece describes work I am the lead on in labs I've collaborated with for more than 15 years. They do not have live or dead bats in them. There is no evidence anywhere that this happened. It's an error that I hope will be corrected." End quote. However, we have just learned that the Wuhan Institute of Virology did keep live bats in cages and humanized mice for experiments to determine which coronaviruses could infect humans. If you have any important information around this, make sure to let us know and we'll keep you updated in the comment section below. In the meantime, stay in the know with Cyberstruck.